r/AskReddit by Redmond Dtes. People who grew up with wealth. What was your I'm privileged wake up call? My parents are wealthy, but I grew up in a place where many of my peers' parents were super duper crazy wealthy, so I had a really skewed understanding of wealth. It was really eye-opening for me when I went to college. I didn't have to take out student loans. My parents were able to just pay for it, but I had friends who even with financial aid had to work their butts off year round to cover the cost of school. I realized pretty quickly just how privileged I was, and that I did in fact grow up with wealth. At this point I already knew I was very well off, but after I had gotten laid off for the first time a few years ago, I took a break for about a month before diving into a job search. I was at the self-checkout at the grocery store next to a woman paying with food stamps. I had recently gotten $100,000 from my grandmother's inheritance, and it hit me. I'm unemployed, not even trying to find a job, and I just got a boatload of money because somebody else died. And she's the one people think is the freeloader. When I was a kid, my best friend came to our house for the first time. He kept saying wow. He was really impressed that we had 2 TVs. It embarrassed me enough that I didn't tell him we had 4. 2 televisions? Wow, you must be rich. Oh honey, he's teasing you. Nobody has 2 television sets. I took my friend to my parents' cabin, and he said, wow, this is nicer than my house. Realizing how having my college tuition covered by parents put me so much farther ahead than everyone else in the long term. Every summer, I went to 8 weeks of overnight camp, or some other cool summer program. 30-day bus tour across western United States, 3 weeks in Australia. I had no idea what those cost at the time. This is how I found out we didn't have money. I begged my mom to send me to an overnight camp. Disney and Nickelodeon shows made it seem like a normal thing that old kids did in the summers. My mom called one, and that stuff was like $2,000 in the 90s. I was gonna say I realized how privileged I was when I spent a summer with my great grandmother in a small village in rural Hungary. No indoor running water, the only phone was at the church, and everyone came out to touch the rental car we drove there in. This was in the late 1980s. But after reading some of the comments on here, I feel poor again, lol. I don't really come from wealth. Just solidly upper middle class, but as part of my job I do home visits and have many clients who are poor. When I first started my career in my 20s, I was shocked to discover there were people in the United States who lived in homes with no indoor plumbing or electricity, with dirt floors, or had outdoor kitchens, not like a barbecue setup, like there was no kitchen inside where they lived, so they had to cook on an oil drum outside. I had no idea. My parents loved to travel. By the time I was 16, I had been to every continent aside from Antarctica. I didn't realize that this was privileged behavior until I went to uni, and most of the guys I met had never left the country. In fact, I grew up thinking I was less privileged because everyone at my school was just obscenely rich. Like all their stuff was high-end designer stuff, while I was in Converse. I've had many, but a particularly memorable one was when a guy at work I'd been flirting with, older than me, I was 19, and he was around 25, so in my naive mind it was plausible that he was set up despite the fact that we both worked shitty retail jobs. Told me he'd signed a lease on a new apartment. How many bedrooms? I asked conversationally. He laughed and said, 5. It's a penthouse suite. Wow, I thought, he's doing pretty well for himself. A couple weeks later he brought me back to his new apartment, which was in fact a 300 square foot studio. At this point it occurred to me that he'd thought I was making a joke when I asked how many bedrooms his new apartment had. Dad was an engineer, so professional wealth, but not like, don't give a fuck wealth. Probably hearing about a kid whose family had to give his dog away due to the cost in elementary school. Giving away our dog wasn't on the radar or even on the table. But it was only out of the question because my parents had the money for it to be out of the question. When I learned that not everyone has a summer cottage or trust fund, and not all grandparents have weekend and summer homes. Probably told this story here before. Grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. During summer break, when I was maybe 10 or 11, I was watching Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Episode finished, and I ran downstairs to my dad, who was on his knees pulling weeds out of the garden, and said, "Dad, you should become a millionaire, so we can have a butler like in Fresh Prince." He just looked at me and said, "Goose frabap, I'm a millionaire," and went back to weeding. There are more rich motherfuckers on Reddit with multiple houses and cabins on a lake than I would have guessed. Becoming an adult and realizing that I have extremely good role models as parents, because when they have disagreements, they talk them out, and I have never ever heard them argue or badmouth each other. I also realized that as a kid my parents got me mental health help that I needed, even though it was expensive, and continued that care for as long as I have needed it. A third one that doesn't seem like much but has had a huge impact was being taught financial literacy from a young age, to budget my money and only buy the things I really want. When I was confused about people on Maury complaining their spouse was at the club, and I couldn't figure out what type of country club would let people like that through the front security gate. That's all folks. Thank you for watching. If you like videos like this one, why not like and subscribe for more? Have a nice evening.